From the Asgard Company Studios in beautiful Wichita Falls, Texas, from the finest mind in the modern fitness industry, the one true voice in the strength and conditioning profession, the most important podcast on the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, starting Strength Radio.
Welcome back to Starting Strength Radio. Good Friday afternoon to you. We are here this week with our friend John Musser. John is a Starting Strength coach and an executive protection guy. And we're going to talk to John about executive protection here in a minute. But first, as usual, comments from the haters. We add that reverb. It's not. We have to add the reverb. It's not just I don't.
You can't do that.
It's not just me. No.
What the
no,
fuck?
we had to. I'm working on it. So this week we've got several interesting things here. An anonymous poster by the name of Millions Social Media says this is about our quit putting the plates on the bar wrong video. He says, I'd beat the living shit out of him if he talked to me in that tone at the gym.
Taking it
says an anonymous fuck. An anonymous fuck on the YouTube comments. That's great. The other ones are less threatening, but they're still hurtful. Butt Goo Magoo says, he looks like he knows about plates. Dinner plates.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Means
Why? Here, Philip Zanoni says, why am I watching this guy with the huge beer gut, with his hands in his pockets, allowing me to sleep with that slow-ass, uninspired, mundane talk? Goid Lord, put some pep in your step or move on. Well, Philip was an English major, wasn't he? You tell Philip was an English major. Again, Mark Penis Rippetoe strikes again. If you only knew. He never mentions how long, see, there's that theme, a sausage should be for a man. He only mentions how fat you have to be to squat 200 kilos. Must be a European. 200 kilos. Right? Guy with a gut and no muscle. Really throwing out the tips. That's Jeremy Sims. And Google user says, this is what an angry fat man looks like.
Now that's hurtful.
This is... John, do you know what this does to me every fucking week? I have to read this shit every week, and I just knowing that there's one person out there that doesn't like me. Oh shit!
Do we know that it's actually users from social media and it's not your own staff?
No, I don't think it's not you guys doing this shit, is it? Is it?
I'm not seeing a bunch of.
They're not denying it.
I'm not seeing a lot. Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's it for comments from the haters. So, after that devastating psychological blow, I'm ready to have some fun here. We're going to talk to John Musser this week. John, thank you for coming from Virginia.
Thanks for having me.
You can't be happy about the Virginia legislature.
No.
And the new gun laws.
I'm not happy about it.
Maybe we'll.
And unfortunately, I can point some pretty clear fingers at why it happened.
Yeah.
Insider threat stuff, right?
Right. Oh, really?
We did it to ourselves, right?
Yeah, sure.
The Republican Party did it themselves.
They always do it.
The NRA did it to themselves.
They always do it to
They're the
themselves.
ones that did it. So
Yeah.
that's who we blame.
So here we are.
Yeah.
And now it can't be undone, at least not for a couple of years, and we're going to see what happens.
That's right.
Those of you that don't know what we're talking about, look it up. Okay? So, anyway, John has been in the executive protection business for a long time. And He's worked for a lot of people that you know. And today, this is a fascinating business. I think those of you that are familiar with what it is will be interested in this. But those of you that don't know what executive protection is, you're going to find this to be a fascinating discussion, because most people that are in a high-profile situation, most people that are in a high-income situation, that are a power situation, must have personal protection when they go out in public. And they go out in public a lot, and so there are a lot of people that are involved in the business of protecting these people in a public situation. And let's talk to John about this. John, what exactly is executive protection?
All right, so executive protection is protecting people. So personal protection is also a good term because it's a little bit more inclusive, right? Executive protection implies it's an executive. Mm-hmm. It could be a celebrity, it could be a child, it could be a person. Personal protection.
A person who might be exposed to a threat of some sort. Right.
Without getting crazy down in the weeds, it's all about risk. So risk is three factors, right? The threat towards your asset, the vulnerability that you have towards that particular threat, and the impact if the threat accomplishes its goal. That's what equals risk. Mm-hmm. So when you look at those three things, then you define if there is a risk and if the risk calls for something to be done about it. There's such a thing as acceptable risk, right?
Right.
And then if it's not acceptable, you apply a countermeasure. And the countermeasure is to reduce the vulnerability, reduce the threat, or reduce the impact in case of the threat being successful.
So these guys aren't just standing around. There's actually some calculation to be done in terms of assessing the threat to the asset, the person being protected.
Right.
And some kind of a decision tree obviously gets applied to what we need to do, how much of it we need to do, this sort of thing. So an executive protection specialist is versed in all of this kind of analysis.
They should be. It doesn't mean that they are, but the very best ones are versed in it, right? So the countermeasure, you decide, like, every day you do some form of risk assessment, right? You decided to put your seatbelt on, you decided not to put your seatbelt on. You decided to lock your door, decided not to lock your door. So every day you do a risk assessment.
Sure.
When you're looking at a person that you're going to protect, you look at that risk based on the environment that they're going to be in, because it changes. When they're in their house, it could be one thing. When they're out in public, it could be another. When they're on a red carpet, walking through a red carpet, it could be another one, right? So it's a constantly changing.
Driving down the street could
Driving down the street could be another one. The very best do these risk assessments in their mind every step of the way. When you're in the VIP section at the strip club, it's one thing. When you walk to the bar, it's another. When they go into the restroom, it's another. When you're on the way to the car, it's another. So it's a constantly evolving thing.
Right.
The very best do these assessments. Now, people that aren't the very best, the people who aren't good at it, they're just somebody standing along, following behind somebody, wearing a shoot me first earpiece and just walking along behind them.
So who is going to have executive protection? And what does it look like when they have executive protection?
So the anyone that's at risk and that can afford it, or that somebody else can afford it for them, is who's going to have the executive protection, right? Mm-hmm. So if they need it, you'll have celebrities, obviously, politicians, statesmen, businessmen, witness protection, all these different government figures, all these different people can have a high enough risk that executive protection would be an appropriate countermeasure. So,
what is the risk generally? Is it kidnapping? Is it murder? Is it just invasion of personal space? What is the risk?
So it depends on the asset, right? So so when I'm taking care of somebody, and when the people that I know do this, and my friends do this, when they're taking care of somebody, they're not only looking after the threat to their physical well-being, which could be assault, could be kidnapping, could be assassination, could be any of those. They're not only looking at that, they're looking at protecting them financially, they're looking at protecting them from embarrassment, they're looking from protecting them from all things. So you're looking at a full spectrum of things. If it costs you money, If it hurts you physically, if it hurts you emotionally, right? If it hurts you mentally, then that's something that I should be considering and try to protect you from. When I the clients that I had, going back 30 years now, longer than 30 years, 30 some years, the clients I had, in my mind, I'm still looking out for them today because of the lifestyles that I was exposed to, the things I know about them, the being in close personal contact with them. You still look out for them, and you don't mention their names, you don't talk stories about them. You still looking out for them now. Right. So the answer to your question is, you're looking at all sorts of threats, whether it's financial, personal, embarrassment, any of those things.
Right. And I guess determining what threats the person might be liable to is part of the.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to be exposed to the same level of threat.
That's exactly right. So if you look at the risk model, you are vulnerable. The threats, strengths, their intents and their capabilities, their strengths determine what your vulnerabilities are, right? Because I'm protecting against a thing. So a lot of times security is best served by reducing your vulnerabilities, because it's the thing that you can control the most, right? You choose to put a seatbelt on or not put a seatbelt on.
Right.
You've reduced your vulnerability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing when protection. You reduce their vulnerability by managing their travel, by making the logistics go smooth, by making sure everything goes perfectly smoothly without any hitches. They don't wait in line at places. They don't get stuck in traffic as often as other people do. All those things reduce your overall vulnerability.
So Bill Gates might have a different threat profile than Julia Roberts or somebody like that.
Everyone's going to have a different.
Everybody's got to. So
now there's some similar profiles. So if you have a client that's going to an overseas venue or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any particular threats against this particular person individually. However, I know that when someone similar to this person, whether it's a celebrity or a businessman or something, has traveled to this location, these are some of the things that they faced.
Mm-hmm.
So then you anticipate that, and you look for people that have used clients similar to yours, and how they did business, and how they did business if they were directed against your client.
So executive protection obviously then is involved in any kind of exposure that the asset would be exposed to long before the actual trip itself takes place.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
they don't just bring you in the day the guy leaves
they should.
the house.
They should.
Right?
They should not. They should not. Now, occasionally that does happen, but it shouldn't happen. The stuff that you do prior to a client's arrival at a location is called the advance work. Mm-hmm. It's the things that you do prior to arrival. So if I get 5 steps ahead of you and I look into the nightclub or I look in the door, then I'm 5 steps ahead. That's my advance, that 5 steps ahead.
Right.
Or if I'm going to a foreign country and I'm there a week before you get there, then that week is the advance too.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So
so you would have time, if you're a week there in advance, you know where the client's going to be.
Yes.
You'll have already been there.
Yes.
You'll have looked at the topography, the geography of the situation.
Yep.
Identified the holes and the
gaps.
Holes,
exactly.
The gaps in the ability to protect the person in this particular situation. Right. And we'll have made some plans for it by then.
Yeah, you make some plans for it, and then you revisit them. Before I came here today, I don't do much stuff like this.
Right.
So I called a few people to talk to them. Number one, I wanted to make sure it was all right if I used their names, not clients, but people I've worked with.
Right.
And then I wanted to get some input from them of some things that they'd like. What are some things that they would like for me to bring up, right? So when you're talking about gaps, when a client has a movie premiere and it goes international,
mm-hmm.
The market, it's more transparent now, but it's always been this way. The world market for a movie is tremendous, right? It's a huge percentage of the gross sales of a movie, or can be.
Or overseas.
Right. Or overseas. So these press junket, or these movie premieres that they go overseas, are really important. And they usually hit 4 or 5 countries in the same trip. And a lot of these countries...
And the releasing company will have planned the release of these movies in sync with the stars who are going to open the movie
That's
at
right.
the location.
That's right. So each trip is going to involve a red carpet appearance where they shake hands.
Right.
Each trip's going to involve a press junket, which are generally pretty easy to manage, a dinner at some point, and then maybe some other sort of event. Each trip has those things. And along the way, you've got hotels that you have to advance. You've got airports you have to advance. You've got to address all of these things. Mm-hmm. So when you travel internationally, if somebody doesn't travel internationally, they may be very good domestically, but it's not the same challenges that you face internationally because of the language barriers, the culture barriers, all those sort of things. So we developed a way of managing these press or these movie releases a while back. So, and it's still the model that a lot of them use today. Mm-hmm. So the one that I'm thinking of right now, it started out in Tokyo. I met with a guy named Cobham. He's a talented guy. He was a bouncer, talented bouncer, and then he was a state trooper, and then he went in the military in the first Gulf War, and then he came back out and became a state trooper, and then he became executive protection guy. He's pushing 60 now.
Right.
Really talented martial artist, really talented, capable, tough guy. Mm-hmm. So we're in Tokyo. We worked the red carpet. I showed him how I worked the red carpet, and we were with a client that was exceptionally well known. He was one of the biggest ones at the time, and he was known for spending a lot of time on the red carpet. He might spend an hour and a half on the red carpet, and then he would go inside the movie. The movie would start. He would come back out and spend more time on the red carpet. In these venues, they've got crowds that it's really hard to imagine seeing. There's thousands and thousands upon people lined up on this red carpet.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah, thousands of people lined up on
That
this
are
red
wanting to
carpet.
shake hands with the guy.
Wanting to shake hands with the guy, wanting to cheer, wanting to scream. And then the production companies, before this movie starts, they pump this information out. They let everybody know where the movie premiere is going to be. They try to get as much press as they can out of it.
Right,
So
sure.
you know what you're walking into, right?
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
extremely exposed.
Extremely exposed. So so Tokyo went real smooth, and then after Tokyo we went to Singapore, and Singapore, Tokyo, then Singapore. We get to Singapore, and they've got these little barricades set up, and they were the smaller bicycle-sized barricades. They weren't large enough for the crowd, but we didn't have time or the assets to get anything else in, so we had to deal with it. So the guy, Cobham's on the ground. He's walking the route. He sees that these barricades are put in not appropriately, so all you have to do is lift them up to completely unlatch them. So he's stealing flex cuffs off all the local cops, and he's having one of the guys go to the hardware store and pick up zip ties simply to try to tie these
Just
barricades
secure the
back.
barriers back
Yeah.
a little bit better.
Just a
than
little
that.
bit better. Not perfect,
Right.
right? No countermeasure is perfect, and everything good a countermeasure
Right.
does something bad. But so he was going through doing all that. So when you talk about identifying a gap, that's a relatively small thing, but it can make the difference between somebody being waiting on your red carpet or not, right?
Right.
So that was a very interesting trip in terms of the screaming crowds, and I've got pictures of me with this guy as he's shaking hands and the hours you spend on the red carpet, and when you're most of the time you try to keep a very big picture view of stuff so that you can see more, but when you're working a guy on the red carpet and he's shaking hands and it's just crowds are just deep and there's thousands of people
Right.
screaming.
It would
and
be
music's
impossible for you to assess each one of those individuals in the crowd.
Well, you can't assess each individual, but what you do is the music's playing, people are screaming. So what you do is your world shrinks, and you're watching each set of hands as it shakes the guy's hand in front of you, and you're trying to scan the hands in front of you, and trying to scan the hand in back of you, and you're doing this sometimes for an hour and a half at a time. Wow! So it's a level of intensity and focus
that's a lot of
a lot of
focus.
people don't get to experience.
Right.
And another thing that happened on that trip is we went to Seoul in the middle, and I would do leapfrog, so I would hit location 1, 2, and maybe 4, you know what I mean? So I'd skip the 1 so I get ahead of time. And when we got to Korea, it had went bad logistically. And if something goes bad logistically as far as cars go and stuff like that, then the whole trip turns to shit, or can turn to shit. So Korea had gone bad, and I was in...
Would that be a situation where you, as executive protection, would advise skipping the stop? Or you don't have that option? You probably don't.
You can always say no, but what's going to happen is you have to say no because it's not safe. You can't say no because it's hard work.
Right.
And my position would be is that if I'm on the ground, it's my job to make those logistics go smooth.
Right.
No matter what shit show I'm handed, I'm the one that's got to make it work.
You've got to figure out a way, and that's part of your job.
Part of my job
is to enable the client to keep the schedule,
to do what they do.
Right.
The goal was not for them to not. The goal was not for them to stay at home and stay safe. They got a job to do. You got to protect them while they do their job.
Right. They're responsible to the film.
That's right.
For promotion, that's written into their contract, I'm sure.
I don't know about the contractual part, but I know a lot of them have felt they're probably some degree, yeah. And but they feel personally responsible. So I get to Taipei, and the local guys tell me, "Listen, I've got I think the number was 50 or 75 people for the airport arrival, and I've got 50 for the hotel arrival." I'm like, that's fucking madness, you know.
50?
Yeah,
EP
security
guys?
guys. No, not EP guys. Security, static security guys.
Right.
So I'm like, that's a tremendous shit ton of people, you know. And they put them all in an auditorium for me to brief on how we're going to do business. Well, in Taipei, people have access to areas that they normally don't have access. Like the airport had complete and utter access. That they didn't want to give us any barricades to get through the airport. So I had to show the guys how to link arms, turn their backs to the crowd, and form a box of people with their arms linked. And then I had the client on the inside, and then I had a loose diamond personnel around him, and then I had a couple of extra floaters so that when the crowd would surge against this box, they could maybe step in if somebody went down, or they could help reinforce a corner of the box of all these guys linking arms. And then the client was able to safely, on the inside of that box, shake hands like it was a barricade. So he was able to shake hands, sign autographs.
Through the box, out the front of it, that sort of thing.
We were coming through the airport, and I had I had a few guys around, not as many as I needed once we hit the public areas. And I heard this like roar, and I could hear it was people. And I looked around the corner, and all these women that worked at this airport came charging around this corner, charging towards the client, and they were all dressed alike, like in uniforms, and they were all about this tall. And I'm like, this is what's going to end me. I'm going to be run over by these motherfuckers. All the shit I've done, I'm going to be run over by a bunch of women in schoolgirl outfits or whatever the hell it was, you know. So that linking arms, you know, I came up with that on the fly. No one had taught me this is how you're going to do a formation if you go to Taipei and you've got 1,500 people waiting at the airport for you.
Right.
That's the way. So I saw that technique at I'd like to share that it was at a very advanced training course, but it was at a wet T-shirt contest. And they had
that's resourceful, isn't it?
They had to.
That's applying the experience.
There was a gap in your protection between when the women went up on stage and their stage. Right. So all these big guys had linked arms and had put their backs up against everything.
So
it's a lot of questions there, right?
So I mean, where do you come up with all this crazy shit? It's just a huge amount of experience in a huge number of different situations. And this is a constantly changing equation.
Yes. Yep.
And it's just so a guy just starting out that's been doing this 6 months has not got a prayer of being able to figure. In other words, there's not an executive protection book that teaches you all of this shit.
No, there's not. There's plenty of books, but they don't teach all the shit. So you got a couple things. The first is you've got natural ability. Training is a polishing action, and you can't polish a turd. So you got natural ability.
Yeah,
natural
you can either do it or you can't.
You can think on your feet. You can do these things. You can deal with what do they call it? Being a bricoleur. You can make sense out of madness, right? You can either do that or you can't. And then there's tools that you pick up. The school, we'll talk about the school in a bit, I guess. The school there's tools that you can pick up at a school where you learn big picture things, and then you get the experience. And then the more experience you got, the better you get at using the tools, and the better it polishes your natural talent, right? So it all builds on each other as long as you stay relevant, you stay at it. So if you got natural talent, then you get some good training, and you start getting good experience, then you get better at the tools you learned, and then it polishes the natural ability. And some people do really well at it, and they make a fortune, and some people don't do really well at it.
Right. If I am looking at an opening, if I'm looking at red carpet situation,
Okay.
who are the EP guys?
Okay, so
What are they going to look like? They got suits,
it depends on the customer. It depends on the client.
right?
I took a tux one time for a red carpet because I was told that everybody needed a tux for the red carpet. And then when I got there, the client said, "Listen, you're going to be the only motherfucker wearing a tux if you wear a tux out here."
Right.
So I didn't wear a tux, right?
Right.
So
Bad info.
bad info. So every once in a while, I'd always wear a blazer to cover up all your shit. Most of the time, it'd be dark clothes, and occasionally I'd wear a tie, but very seldom wear a tie. Sometimes I'd wear a tie.
Right.
The red carpet, learning how to manage a red carpet is a big part of this stuff. So you're going to have the client there. You're going to have some film people doing some stuff, taking pictures, right? And then you're going to have the strap hangers holding on to the client's shoulder, right? Because they want to hang out with the client and be important.
Who are these people?
The strap hangers could be anywhere from people associated with a production company. It could be venue people that are there that want to get shot on camera. It could be somebody personally associated with the client that's standing by that client in case the client's got particular needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Personal
then
assistants.
personal assistants, stuff
these
like
kind of
that.
things. Right.
Generally, there'll be a management or an agent person will be walking along for that too, depending on the size of the client, you know. And then you've got local security. Now, this is very important. Local security's job at a red carpet event is to stand somewhere so that they get a picture taken of them with the client so they can get laid that night. That's their number one fucking job. So everywhere you go,
Right.
you've got some fucknut trying to get in the shot, right?
Right,
If I
right,
stand beside
right.
a rip, I'm going to get laid. That's all I
Right.
have to do.
Right.
So you got that to deal with. So when you're managing the red carpet, you know, you keep it as clear as possible from people. You've got all this screaming and shouting going on. You've got the client shaking hands, and you got to be careful not to step back and step to hell on somebody by accident, step on their foot. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you got a female client, she got a long dress. You got to be close enough to take care of her, but you can't step on her damn dress, right? That's
Right.
pretty
You got to
ridiculous.
keep people from stepping
Keep people
on
on
the
her. So it turns into quite the event. The cleaner you keep the red carpet, and the more you manage that environment, the better off you are. Now, if somebody says, "Well, I wouldn't let my client get out of the car if that was a situation," then they've never been someplace all fucked up trying to protect somebody, right? You got to make sense out of this. This is what you're dealing
Right.
with.
You can't not let the client get out of the car because their job is to get out of the car.
And unless I can clearly identify something where I could say, "Listen, ma'am, this is not safe." You know,
Right.
unless I could clearly identify something where that was the case. I've had clients wait before. Not in the car. I've hadn't had them wait, fortunately, but I've had them wait at the hotel room before we left because the guy on the ground, I wanted to give him more time to make things happen. Now,
Right.
if you've got a talented protection guy, they're making things happen. If you got a guy that's not talented or a girl that's not talented, they're just hanging out waiting for the client to show up. They're not
Right.
there working it.
Right.
So the way about the security guys is they will not they shouldn't have anything else going on other than focused on that client, their client, and they'll move with that client. Yeah, move with the client.
So what's an EP guy get paid? I would assume this is commensurate with his experience, his reputation, his previous client list. That would have to do with how much in demand he is. The more in demand he is, the more money he makes a day. These are day fees. Is there a long-term contract? How's this all handled?
There's some guys are working corporate gigs where it's a regular corporate gig and they're
Salary
and that's a position. That's a form of EP and that's fine. Guys that are doing it, they're picking up different clients. Then it depends on how much money is coming in for that particular event. Guys will set a rate, and that rate they won't go below that rate. But if something is pressing or they need them in the morning, they got to leave their house. A friend of mine just had to leave her house with a couple hours notice, right? And that costs more.
Right.
You know, that costs more.
Right.
So the number is, depending on who's defining executive protection, because not everybody defines it the same, right? Somebody might say that an unarmed security guy is executive protection. He just doesn't happen to have a uniform on, right?
Right.
So the money can be from very, very little to a fucking whole lot. A couple grand a day, you know.
A couple of grand a day is
Couple grand
considered
a day.
a lot of money.
Yeah, considered a lot of money. I hate to be one of them geezers that says back in the day, but way back when, the money across the board was generally higher because there weren't as many people doing it. Now, it doesn't mean that the quality's gone up. It just means that there's more
the
people.
supply
saying
is
the
going
supply
up.
going up. So the money overall has come down over the years.
Really?
Yeah, it's sort of. If you look at it, I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there that'll piss and moan it's not the case, but it simply is the case. The money has come down over the years for a whole lot of people. For the people at the top of the game, it's not coming down
Right.
because they'll do something else.
So, how many people at the top of the game are there working right now in this country?
Oh damn!
A couple of hundred?
You know, it depends on how you. A friend of mine used to use percentages, but that doesn't really help us because we don't have a whole number to take that percentage
Right.
off. But he always liked to talk about the one percenters, and the one percenters are somebody that can travel internationally, that can work one-on-one with a client, that can do the advanced work, that can be a part of their lifestyle, that's going to fit into their lifestyle, they can hang out with them and not draw attention to themselves, and they can fly under the radar, and then has contacts in different parts of the world where they can call and get help if they need it, and they can make arrangements on the phone. Those are the one percenters, you know, and there's not that many.
That's
of
a
them.
large skill set. That's
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Now, if you need somebody to walk around with some goofball in New York for 3 days, then you can pick up a ton of people that
Right.
will do that, you know.
But I guess not everybody can travel overseas because passport conditions and
Yeah, the
language, accessibility,
Yeah.
this sort of thing are not.
Yeah,
they're not available to be gone for 3 weeks.
if you get in the business, you ought to be able to get a passport. If you can't get a passport, something's wrong.
You can't get a passport, you shouldn't.
be in a business.
Right.
The ability to travel. You know, there's a lot of people that have traveled with large groups. There's a lot of people that have traveled under with guidance and with help and different things, right?
Right.
But to show up on your own and make all of this stuff happen personally, to manage the drivers, manage the local security, especially in a lot of places like you go to some places, some Asian countries, you know, and when they say yes, it doesn't mean yes. So you say, I need these rock and roll barricades, and they'll say, oh, yes, I know. And then you'll say, I need this, and they say yes, because it's rude to say no.
Right. That doesn't mean.
It doesn't mean it's
It
going to be
means
there.
I understand, not I agree.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
want to be rude by saying no, but there's no shit in the way it's going to happen, John. You know, so you understand those things, and then you sort of plan for it. You say, all right, they said that's going to be there, but I'm going to have to walk by and take a look at it to make sure it's
Right.
there.
Make sure it's
See
what
it.
I ordered. Well, I suppose that extremely young people who appear to be extremely young are probably less effective as EP people than a mature
You know what?
individual, right? I mean, that seems reasonable to.
It's hard
You
to
got a little baby-faced 22-year-old kid. It doesn't really matter what he actually knows or can do. He's got a different physical presence than a 45-year-old guy, right?
Well, yes, that's how, there's no doubt about that. The presence and the gravitas and all that sort of thing, it plays into it.
Right,
There's
sure.
no doubt.
It would obviously play into it.
But I was very young. I hadn't hit my 30s yet, and I was running details overseas, and I was having former this and former that, working for you on a part-time detail, and age is not always a benefit.
Right.
It's simply not. Now there are some very capable guys that are pushing 70 now that are still doing the job.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's value to both. I'm not one of them. I don't think that just because somebody's young doesn't mean that they can't do the job.
Right.
I don't think that.
Well, it might influence their position in the detail.
It could. A lot
Right.
of times we would. I was younger, so I would get put on the advance a lot because I could hustle, and I was very fortunate when I got in the business. we'll talk about the training later. But when I got into business, I went to work for a guy that was already famous, a personal protection guy that was already famous.
Right.
And I won't mention his name because he doesn't like that sort of exposure. But he was already famous for being one of the most talented guys around. And that was 30-some years ago, and he's still doing it now, So when I went to work for him, and we spent 45 minutes learning how to open a car door, and I thought I was going to lose my goddamn mind. Or when you go out to lunch, and instead of just enjoying lunch, he'd be talking about, well, when you go into the Ritz in Paris, you're going to see this on your left, and you'll see this in front of you. And you got just swamped with that shit every second. I managed to listen to some of it. So then I went to New York and worked for a really well-known, difficult client with a legitimate risk. And that upped my experience quite a bit. A matter of 3 years, or 2.5, 3 years, I was probably on the road 250, 300 days out of the year.
With this client?
With this client,
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a crash course.
Yeah, and we had to get young guys. Not that there's not a lot of old guys that can work their ass off, I understand that, but we had to get young guys for that detail because of a couple of things. Number one, the living conditions. Usually, if an old guy, you can work his ass off all day long as you can give him a good place to crash at night.
Right.
And the living conditions there weren't what a person would go accustomed to. Now, when you traveled, your hotels were always the greatest, finest stuff, But the hours were so long. You would you'd go to bed at 12:30, and then you'd be back up and running at, we usually set the alarm for 5:15, 5:30.
Right.
And that,
old
you do
guys,
that for 50 days.
Old guys can't tolerate that for 50 days.
They don't want to. No. They should be in a position in life where they don't have to.
By then.
Yeah, by then,
right. Right. That's
and if they're not
entry-level people.
If they're not, you might want to look at why.
Why they're not.
They're not.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. How many women are doing this?
That's an interesting thing. Whenever you bump into a female in a class, or you see some female working a detail, you always sort of pay attention to them because the demand for females is so great in this business. Some clients absolutely demand a female protection person, and because there's so few people doing the work anyway, and there's much less women doing the business, that when you find a good female that can do the job, you really focus on them, and you do your best to.
Right, because there's a big demand for that.
There's a huge demand for it, yeah. And so much of what we do is logistics and planning and attention to detail and surveillance detection, and just so much of it involves stuff other than knocking the shit out of somebody,
Right.
That it's very useful to have. A friend of mine, her name's Jessica. She came through a class that I teach at relatively recently, 7-8 years ago. She came through the class. She was a shooter, but that's not necessarily unusual. People being shooters, right? She came through the class. She was a shooter. She didn't have any protection experience. She went on a small detail. She noticed a problem, a gap in the legal stuff, the legal side of things. Was this detail operating legally? Did they have the license? Was it right for the tax guy? And she studied and became a subject matter expert in this one sliver of the stuff. Well, along the way, really experienced guys noticed that she was a subject matter expert in this small sliver that was boring as shit. They started using her to take care of this stuff.
Right.
And she did a good job for them. She paid attention. And most importantly, Jessica kept her damn mouth shut about who she was working for. She didn't brag about these people that she was doing this stuff for. And then they would give her increased opportunities. And now she's traveling. She was probably out of the country 3/4 of the year last year, traveling, doing protection. Not the small sliver that she became a subject matter expert in, but full-blown protection details. She's on a very complicated detail right now. So there's opportunities there for everybody if they have something to offer.
Right. Yeah. So how do you develop into executive protection? Do most guys come out of law enforcement, military? What's the general background before you get to executive protection school, as it were? Who does this?
So in the late 70s, law enforcement and military. Some intelligence type people, right? But law enforcement, intelligence, some intelligence type people. Every once in a while, you get somebody else in the mix. Now, I notice that they come from just about everywhere. So there are some crossover skills between law enforcement and military, obviously. But just because somebody's a good cop doesn't mean they're going to be a good protection person.
Well, it doesn't mean they're going to be a good soldier either. They're
No,
three completely different
No.
specialties.
I can speak about law enforcement. I can speak about protection. The soldiering stuff, the military stuff, I can't speak about. I've never been in the military.
Right.
But I know that, it's some crossover skills. And I've known very talented people that did all three, But now it's not as clear cut a path as it used to be, or it never was clear cut. But it's not, the selection is not necessarily from law enforcement or military. It's from all different walks of life.
Well, law enforcement people and military people have two completely separate jobs.
Yes.
Military people kill people and break things, or support people who kill people and break things. Law enforcement gets in trouble and pisses all of the rest of us off when they think their job is to kill people and break things.
Well,
So because that's not their job.
That's not their job.
That's not their job.
It might be a unfortunate side effect, but that's not their priority. So
Right.
So for law enforcement and protection, to take a very complicated answer and reduce it down to its finest point, a good cop is always looking for trouble to get into, right? Because that's how you stir up shit, right? You're
Right.
looking for the drugs, you're looking for this, you're looking for that. You're always looking for something, and you're looking to lay hands on somebody and make an arrest. A protection guy is looking to avoid all of this trouble way before anybody else even knows that it's trouble.
Right.
You want
The
to.
last thing a protection guy wants to do is to have to lay hands on somebody for a client.
Yes.
Because if I would imagine that if that occurs, that would mean that somebody has failed at some point in the analysis.
Yeah, it's somebody's failed, but I haven't had to deliver the hands-on thing on a few times. Sometimes the failure is not the protection guy. Sometimes
Right.
the failure is someplace else. But yeah, something
And
else. went
sometimes
wrong.
just random shit happens.
Random
A guy
shit happens.
walks into the situation. Nobody was planning on it. Nobody can control it, and it has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that if that has to happen, it reflects badly on the client.
Yes. If the client's
If the client you don't want to show the client in a position of vulnerability or reacting to something that went badly that would reflect poorly on the client
Yeah, when you
later on down the road.
when we were talking about protecting all aspects of the client, right?
Right.
That's part of the protecting from embarrassment.
Right.
Stand there while you're doing something silly and rolling around the garage trying to shrimp in between fucking bar stools or something. You know?
Right. Yeah, that doesn't look good.
Yeah, so you want to avoid that. Yeah. The it's always interesting, you try to prepare, and if you plan, people say, well, the plan, all plans disappear with the first punch. You hear all that shit, but it's preparing. So planning is part of preparing. Now, even if the plan goes to shit, if you've prepared well enough, if you understand your environment well enough, then even if something happens that's not according to plan, you're still prepared for it, right? So every step along that red carpet, every step I'm with a client walking down the street, every time I approach a car, you're thinking, all right, where am I going to go if? Right? One of the things we talk about is it's easier to decide when to do something than what to do.
Right. If you've got guys coming into protection from police, military, intelligence, I would imagine attorneys,
State managers, everything, anything you can imagine, any position you can imagine.
accountants, people that are used to dealing with a lot of data and moving things around in an orderly, analytical fashion, probably would have the raw material necessary to be EP. So how do you learn EP? Is there a school? How many schools are there?
There's countless schools. Back in the old days, there was only a couple. The school that I promote and the one I've worked at forever is the Executive Protection Institute. It's been around since 1977. It was started by Richard W. Kobetz. We lost him a year and a half ago. He passed away. He started the school, and his original goal is to be able to look like, act like, dress like your client, so you could go where your clients went, right? So his was all about preparation. So, so being able to fit in and blend into the environment, you know, and still take care of business.
Right.
And he was a very big, tough, capable guy, and he attracted big, tough, capable people around him. And he started this school. And the thing that I like about that school is that it focuses on the realities of executive protection, and it changes with the times. And the people that teach there are people that are doing the work or are subject matter experts in something that applies to that work. Do you know what I mean? So it's not, and it's not a bunch of war stories. We've got a very clean, well-defined lesson plan. Changes every time we teach the class, and people come through, and if they got something to offer, they generally get a job. They can find a job. Now, it's not a placement program.
Right.
It's a school. So
Sure. Good schools are not placement programs, and most places that say they will get you a job are not particularly good schools, and that's true of any situation like that.
you think so? Yeah.
I really do, yes. I really do. If the focus is the end product, they're going to be more likely to get you shit out the other end of the thing and matriculate you than they are to actually put you through a process that might eliminate you. Because if they're selling matriculation, you know, this is like in the fitness certification business.
Sure.
If you don't pass, you don't pay. Oh, come on.
It's kind of weird.
You know, but that's what they do.
That's
what they do.
For someone, the school is designed to appeal to, and the tools, and I've had a lot to input into the lesson plan, you know, and I've done this stuff. I've protected celebrities, businessmen, politicians. I did some witness protection, not a lot, and government officials. I've protected them all, you know. So I've put together tools that can be applied across the board. So if you are a very skilled guy coming in with a lot of experience, then you can take these tools and you can apply them. If you're new to the business, then you take those tools and you can apply them. A guy that's been lifting, you know, a guy that's really strong can do deadlifts better if you measure by the weight than somebody that's not. But you can still, that same tool, you can still learn from it. Right? So we've had very good luck with it. That's who I've supported over the years. They've been loyal to me, and I've been loyal to them. It's not a significant part of my income, for God's sakes, but I do enjoy it. For years, it would cost me money to go there.
This is probably a question on some people's mind. How much overlap, similarity, borrowing from is there between executive protection and the Secret Service?
It's a good question. A long time ago, I was assigned to protect a guy, and it was at a place called King of Prussia, and it was a shithole then. It's still kind of a shithole. It's not a very big place. It's in Pennsylvania, and there's a bunch of business. It's like a industrial park, right?
Right.
So the guy was going to come in. I was meeting him at the steps, meet him at the door when he got out of his car, take him up the elevator, take him to the meeting, walk him back out of the meeting, put him in the car, and take off. Pretty easy gig, right? Pretty easy gig. So I jump on board. I get there early. I run the routes to the hospital, all the shit you do. And then I'm waiting for the guy. I get him in the room, and I'm there. About 15 minutes later, this dude comes hustling up, running late to the meeting. He's a protection guy. I recognize the guy he was with. And they get in, and whenever you're with somebody and you're standing outside in the hallway, or you're standing in a doorway, or you lean up against a car, a lot of people feel overwhelming need to impress upon you how cool they were at some other job. Because standing out in the fucking rain or leaning up against the wall,
it implies a level of subservience.
Yes, it's not particularly cool, right?
Right.
So he started regaling me with tales of unbelievable competence.
Right.
And then he was asking me a bunch of questions. Now, I'm 20 couple years old at the time, you know. So he said, what model of protection do you use? I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. So what are you talking about, what model? He said, well, we use the Secret Service model of protection.
Right.
That's all you do. So I walked to the window, look out the window. He said, what are you looking for? And I said, I'm looking for local law enforcement. I'm looking for Suburbans. I'm looking for big giant trucks. I'm looking for guys with guns. I'm looking for motorcades. I'm looking for all this shit because that's what the Secret Service does.
Everywhere the Secret Service goes, they're accompanied by
it's a bunch of
all
shit.
of these accoutrements.
Yeah,
right?
all this stuff. And he says, "Well, I didn't mean that." I said, "What did you mean?" He said, "Well, the way we carry ourselves." I said, "So you wear cheap suits and you wear shoot me first earpieces even though you got nobody to fucking talk to. And that's how the Secret Service does business." No, it's not. Only people can protect like the Secret Service is the Secret Service, right? It's the only people in the world because they're the only ones with the budget and with the authority and all that sort of stuff. So the carryover can be there, but for the type of clients that I worked, not so much.
Really?
Because you don't have the. Now there's some very talented guys that left the Secret Service, and did very well in the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
However,
they had to change their
the way they did
procedures.
business. Had to change the way they did business,
right?
Because they don't have the personnel, they don't have the manpower. At Secret Service, you got guys that do nothing but keep an eye on the goddamn car. You got all this local law enforcement support.
Right.
You got all this different things, and it's just not available to the vast majority of customers. Well, nobody can protect somebody at the Secret Service. Nobody's got the budget, right?
Right.
Life has no. There is no price on life, but there is a budget. Right?
There is a budget. So, what's the earpiece? The little clear coily thing. Where does that go?
They've gotten better over
what
the years.
What the hell is that? They all have one of those things.
So if you and I are sitting in a bar, Rip, and we're sitting there, and we're dressed like this, we're just two exceptionally good-looking guys hanging on the bar.
Relatively innocuous, although handsome. And
distractingly so.
Distractingly so.
But if you
with a magnetic,
just a
draw to
panties just drop.
Women.
See it happen.
Yeah, it's us. So
if we're sitting there like that, then we're fine.
Right.
We're blending in. We're not drawing attention to ourselves. Not doing anything. We're sitting there with an earpiece in and a tablet up and clicking away and looking at pictures and not so surreptitiously taking pictures of exits and shit. Then we're drawing all this attention to ourselves, right? We're security. So everything that a countermeasure does good, it does something bad. If I'm drawing attention to my client, then I have created an additional vulnerability because it's made them more recognizable. There's an acronym called
Why would this person need security?
Not just
that
why,
sort of
but
thing.
Now, if it's a client that's not, so what will happen is you go to a big airport like LA or something, you walk around, you look for the security, and then you wait to see who they're there to pick up.
Right.
It's not complicated, right?
You can see them a mile away.
You see a security a mile away, and you just wait for them to pick up. A friend of mine was at a mall outside of D.C. the other day, and they texted me. They said, "Listen, I got security all over the place. I'm trying to figure out who they're protecting." And they eventually figured it out. Now, there's a good chance that if that person would have had a much lower profile security, they wouldn't have drawn attention. I was working a client in Vegas one time. I had to live at the Bellagio for 5 months. It was fucking horrible. Just a terrible, stressful event. And when I met this client for the first time, they said, "I'm glad you're here. I don't want to interfere with your paycheck. But it's been my experience that if I go into a nightclub or a bar or something and I've got security, they draw so much attention to me that it's worse than if I go in by myself."
Right.
And I said, "Well, yes.
That's your calculation, I guess.
That's because you've had shit security. You've had guys that didn't know how to blend in.
Right.
They couldn't blend in. They didn't learn the environment. They didn't figure out where to stand. Now, sometimes you have to be there, and your presence and the deterrence of you being there outweighs drawing attention to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that occurs, and that's just part of you deciding what countermeasure to use. But most of the time, if you can go unnoticed, or the less attention you draw to yourself, the better off you are.
Would you say that the best protection is the least obvious?
Depending on the environment. It all depends on risk, right? So the easy answer would be yes. That's the easy answer.
Right.
But that's not going to always be the answer because best is very hard to define.
Well, I guess there are some circumstances where you want it obvious the guy's being protected.
You want a presence. And maybe that maybe that presence there is to distract potential attention away from somebody else that's there doing protection too. They're just not being obvious.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, so
right.
It's like
and this is the decoy.
In a way,
and the real guys, you're not even looking at.
I was working with a client. They called me up. They went out on their own, which happens, right? They went out on their own. They called me up and said, "Listen, John, I'm at such and such. It's kind of jammed up. Can you get me out of here?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can get you out of here." I said, "A few minutes from now, there'll be a big giant white limo pull up in front. from an unnamed hotel that we weren't staying at. He said, am I going to get in that limo? I said, no, you're going to sit right there. So the big limo pulled up out front. Everybody surges around this big limo. I walk past security at the front of the place, go past the bouncers, go get this guy, go out the back and grab a cab and go back home. Right? You know, why?
Right.
You know, you can out-clever yourself, but generally speaking, I avoided that whole shit show out front.
Right.
Now you won't
This is
always
like a
go
professional magician.
Yes.
Right.
If you can
He's
be a
giving you
escape artist.
something to look at
Yeah.
that he wants you to look at because he doesn't want you to look at something else.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. That's exactly right. Being an escape artist is one of the things that a good protection guy is. Yeah.
Right. I guess those are the basics. Tell us a story. Tell us a story. You've worked with a whole bunch of people. You and I are friends, and you told me some names. And we're not going to talk about that because that's unprofessional, but you've worked with a bunch of important people, and I know you've been places and done a bunch of cool stuff. So what do you... Tell us a story that doesn't rat anybody out.
Doesn't rat anybody out. I was in Spain, and so at a expo, a world expo, and this is when Princess Di and everyone. Princess Di was still alive, you know.
Right.
That's how long we're going back. And they had a big tent. The Brits had a big tent set up in this World Expo.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm mid-20s, and
Yeah.
I'm in a suit that a guy in his mid-20s can afford. And I'm protecting this female client, and her job was she was going to go inside the main door of this tent, hang out where the royal family was, hang out with everybody, and shoot the shit and do everything else. And then I was to wait, and I'd already picked out a great place to wait, to sit in a chair until she came back out. They've got security set up, the royal family's in there for God's sakes. Everybody's got this cool thing that shows that they're allowed to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's perfect. So I walk up there with this client, and she says, "Stay with me," because it was one of these little wheelie things, right? Where you got to walk in the little, like a ride at King's Dominion.
Serpentine
Little
kind of.
like a ride at King's Dominion.
Right.
So I'm in there with her, and we get up, and I've got a break in this little barricade. I'm like, I'm going to step out through that break and avoid this and step out and let her go inside. So when we got up there, she was a little bit in front of me, and she says, "John, come here. You can see the princess. You can see her right there." I'm like, "Oh, see the princess, you know?" So she goes, "Get in line. You can see the princess." I said, "You come up here." And I'm like, "All right." So I go up there with her, and then I'm in the line, and that's it. There's no place to go.
And you can't get out.
I can't get out. So between the barricade that controls personnel and between the guy looking at the card to make sure that you get in is a little gap. And what they call that in physical security is, does physical security support access control? Well, that gap meant that physical security did not support access control. So when she got up there, she handed him the pass, the little card, and I stepped behind this guy as he was looking at her card, and I stepped right beside her when she came out. So I bypassed every security that they had, everything they had in place, everything they had, I bypassed by stepping around, right? I did what they call the path of least resistance. Very clever of me to step around security. It was almost unheard of genius on my part to be able to step behind a security guy.
Right.
So I'm in line with her now, and I'm like, fuck.
And you're in
I'm in.
the deal where you don't have a pass to be.
No, I'm inside. Well, then, so then I'm like, all right, I'm done. I'm finished. Well, that's not finished at all, because you go up there and there's some dude there with a British accent and some girl there with a British accent, and they ask you your name, and then they announce it, and the whole crowd looks up while you walk down and shake hands with the royal family.
Oh, my
So the
God.
client goes in front, she goes, her name, they announce it, shakes hand. I said, "John Musser, Mr. Musser," and I go down and shake hands with the royal family. I felt like Frank Drebin from Police Squad, right? So I'm like, I am fucking fired. This is done. So I hang out with her. And
Well, it was her fault. I mean,
well, yeah, I blame everything on the client, of course. So I'm like, 20-some years old. I'm eating good. I'm drinking lots of good tea and coffee and hanging out. And we're in there for a while. And then she leaves, and she never mentions it. And I get back to the hotel. Prior to having a cell phone, of course, I get back to the hotel, and I call this guy up. And the guy's running the detail, and I trust him completely, And he started laughing before I was even finished the fucking story. He goes, "You were her official escort." I said, "Is that the story?" He said, "Nobody will ever ask." And they never did.
wow.
So it took me how long to defeat their whole security process? Right?
30 seconds. 15 seconds.
But I got to shake hands with all of them.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder if anybody learned anything from this on
Nobody
their
ever knew
end.
about it.
Nobody ever knew about it.
Nobody said anything to me. Nobody said anything. So one of the things you do if you're looking at a place, anytime you do an assessment for vulnerability, you look at it from the point of view of the bad guy. So if anything anybody's listening takes away from this, always look at everything like the bad guy. Think like the bad guy. That's the number one thing.
Right.
So
Try to pick it apart.
Try to pick it apart. So as I was approaching the place, when I say a vulnerability assessment, I'm really saying a target assessment, right? Because I'm looking at it like a target. So every place you approach, you look at it like a target, and you think, all right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Well, I had my whole 15 seconds to figure out how I was going to defeat this security, and it worked out perfectly.
Well, that's a pretty good story. Yeah. That's just excellent.
You want another stupid physical security story?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So I got hired to, there was an organization that was having a big meeting, and it was a member meeting, and it was going to be 1,500 people there in this fucking giant place, right? Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, there was a parade, a Cinco de Mayo parade, and at the same time, there was a protest in the front. So this is a big fucking event. Well, there's no really well-known people there. I was there to more manage the event itself and to manage the security and this and that. Mm-hmm.
On behalf of a client?
On behalf of a client. The client was the people holding the event.
Oh, okay.
And they wanted somebody outside to come in, which was very, it was a brave thing on their part to admit that they needed somebody from the outside looking at it. So it was a good thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. So I came in to view it, and we went with these, in front of the stage, we went with these little stanchions that got rope and pole, right? You see them at strip joints and places. Mm-hmm. And they got the little hook on them, right? So we went with those. And the reason you go with something like that is that I'm not worried that this crowd, it's all friendly crowd and all these people, I'm not worried about anybody surging, but what that does is it identifies, it's a statement of it identifies a boundary.
Right.
Don't go past it.
It's a barrier, a boundary.
Don't.
It's an idea. Well, what would it be called? It's a psychological barrier.
Yeah, it's like
what it is.
Hey, knucklehead, don't go past here. And then the other thing it does, it gives you opportunity. It's like it's a statement of intent. So if somebody goes up there, they see that, it's very clear you're not supposed to step over. Right. If they step over it, then you can focus on it and do something about it. So we went with that, and everything was fine. Well, then there was a few people coming in, and they brought some different security with them of mixed skill set. And at 11 o'clock at night, I get a call from the director of this organization's security, and he said, such and such is detailed here, and they want to bring in barricades in front of the crowd. I said, all right, I'll come down and look at it. So I got down, and I looked at this guy that was the security guy from the outside, and I identified him. As soon as I saw him, I knew everything there was in the world to know about him. He was a former cop who had hurt his back vacuuming at home and went and declared partial disability. He had a holster sniffer buddy with some money in his pocket, and they started a security company, and he was the cat's ass. He was away from town.
Right.
He was on per diem. He was the cat's ass. And so he came in, and he said, listen, I need barricades up here. I said, is there some concern I'm not aware of? Right. And he said, I've got no concerns other than this barricade.
He's already a cop.
So I said,
no, he's a vice principal. Is what he is.
Yeah.
Because I said so.
Yeah. He's a coach, right?
Right.
So I said, no, these are staying. And he said, why? I said, you're too stupid for me to explain. Because if I got to go through the basics of, I've got to go do a physical security lecture that anybody that's ever done anything from fucking fencing a cattle to have an electric collar on a dog, that anybody that's ever done that understands it. If I've got to go through that with him at 11 o'clock at night, it's too much work.
You wouldn't understand the explanation.
I should have been like, not today, Satan, should have done something like that. But I just said, you're too stupid. I don't have time to explain this. And then the next day they said, John, was there another way to do it? I said, I could have called him a prick.
There were several ways to do it.
If he wants me to teach him his job,
right?
If he wants me to teach him his job, you have to pay for it. It's a separate bill.
Right.
Yeah.
You're too stupid. Oh, that's good. That's good. I've gotten less shy about that as I've gotten older.
I used to think I was better, but I'm not. I was bad in the early days when you were so busy and working so hard. You started to have less tolerance for stuff, and then you would snap at stuff. And that's not. There's better ways to do stuff, but I never learned many of them.
How about some of the physical gear questions? What do you carry when you're at work? Does it vary with the client? What's your typical kit?
It's all about the risk, and a typical kit. Unfortunately, I don't sell go bags. I don't sell gear. I don't sell anything with Velcro. I don't sell those rails. They look like shelving from fucking Lowe's that they're putting on the side of those little varmint rifles now. I don't sell any of that stuff.
Right.
So the money is absolutely in the shovels and the tents. The money's not in the gold. Right.
Right.
So I don't.
Right.
I don't sell any of that. The risk is going to determine what you carry with you. A lot of times when you're talking about your personal gear, you'll start to pare down your equipment real quick so that you don't have to keep track of it.
Right.
If the risk is if you need firearms, then you're going to have to jump through the hoops to get the firearms if you can. Sometimes you can't. You get local guys to take care of stuff. The work.
Well, but I mean, just in the course of a normal detail, say you're working in Baltimore. What would you carry?
Well, number one, you'd never violate any local laws or customs. We know that. So you would never do that.
So an EP guy in a jurisdiction that prohibits the carrying of pistols.
Yeah, if he
handguns,
carries,
you can't carry handguns.
if he's carrying a gun, it's on him. If things turn to shit, it's on him, right?
Right. Well, would he do it or not?
It depends on the guy. It depends on the risk.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you are working for a high-profile client, somebody that you might have to go to jail after defending, you would probably do it, right?
I wouldn't make that. I wouldn't make that call. My advice would be don't break the law. That's my advice on that.
I understand.
But
what would you? Let's say you're going overseas, and you're going to be and most overseas jurisdictions don't allow you to carry weapons.
Right.
What do you do?
Well, you have to determine if the risk calls for a weapon. If it calls for a weapon, you're going to try to find somebody local.
I mean, you can't have a pocket knife in the UK.
No, the UK's gotten crazy now.
Oh, it's a strange place.
The UK's gotten crazy now.
It's a strange place.
Now, some clients.
I mean, a homeowner can't defend his property against.
It's insanity.
It's bizarre.
It's insanity, and they've let that happen to it.
Yes, they've chosen this fiction over the reality of any situation.
Yeah, they've chosen.
So you would not, for example, if you're working at a UK, you're unarmed.
Yes. Yeah. For the most part. Now, there's some clients that go over, and depending on the treaty arrangements between the countries, depending on the client, some of them will be armed. That happens.
And so they would get special dispensation to carry in a situation like that.
It's pretty rare, but it happens. Yeah.
Right. I guess Secret Service in a situation like that does whatever they want to, right?
No. There's
they don't.
No,
really?
There's still treaty arrangements. So they're going to. I don't know the exact details of how they do it, but they'll be armed. They will be armed, but they don't necessarily carry off duty. They've got a shift that they carry. There's certain things.
Right.
So that you'll see that occasionally. I don't know the details of it though.
Right.
But you're in somebody else's country, so depending on the treaty arrangements, depending on the local support that you got, depending on the client, depends on all that stuff, and it's hard. There's no easy rules for that. Even traveling in the U.S., there's no easy answers for any of that. And
Texas is different than New Jersey.
yes,
So,
yeah.
depending on where would you intentionally? Well, would it be your preference to have a sidearm if the jurisdiction allowed it to happen?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's not a big part of the deal, but I'm a gun guy. I'm going to want to have a gun, right?
Right.
So it's the logistics, the planning, the preparation, all that stuff is way more important, and you see examples of that way more. However, if you can be armed, and a lot of times, there are clients out there that will stipulate that they don't want any of their people to be armed.
Really?
They'll say that they don't want armed security. And that generally means that they've had a bad experience with somebody who was armed.
Right.
Some knucklehead. So, all right, back in the 70s, there was a very well-known guy getting presidential security. He had...
What is presidential?
Secret Service. He was getting Secret
Oh,
Service.
okay.
This guy is a very well-known dude. He was on a plane in a foreign country, and because the guy protecting him, one of the guys protecting him was a ninja, he had a Uzi, and he had taped the grip safety.
Excellent.
Yeah, good move, right?
Yeah.
On a Uzi especially. So
What? What?
Because he's a ninja. Rip, you got to be fucking quick.
I see. That safety would have interfered with
Yeah, absolutely.
half second.
Grab
It makes all the difference.
So
Grabbing the grip is
Yeah.
just too slow.
Yeah.
you don't know the speeds I'm capable of. So,
Oh, Jesus Christ.
so he taped up his grip on his Uzi, and he had it in the plane, jostled, and the round cooks off, and it misses the guy he's protecting his head by about that much. Right.
Oh.
Well, the guy went on to a long career, and that's fine. But he put up with a lot of shit every time somebody would see him. Now, that was before my time, but that was a cautionary tale when I came through. So,
Right.
if anybody thought there was too much of a ninja with a gun, that story was always waiting. Right.
Right.
So, it's part of the business. Same as learning how to fight's part of the business. Being able to take care of yourself, how to business. How to eat at a full place setting table is part of the business.
Right.
Knowing how to dress is part of the business. Knowing how to behave in somebody's airplane is part of the business. All that's part of the
Learning
business.
how to drink without getting drunk.
Learning how to drink without getting drunk if you're going to
Is
drink
part-
at all. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We.
Yes.
I've had different rules on that with clients. I was on a detail one time. The first detail I went on, it was 30 days at a time and 30 days off. And then during that 30 days, you worked your ass off. And we just had a no booze rule for 30 days.
Right.
Because you had 30 days off to drink.
Sure.
If you wanted to, yeah.
But under certain social situations, you're going to be expected to
It-
be able to hold your liquor.
Yeah, if it's interesting. It's easy to say, listen, when you're around a client, you'll never drink. But if you've been around a client for 50 days and you're hanging out at their house and they are having a drink and they invite you to a drink, yeah, I'll have a drink.
Sure.
I picked up a guy, very tough, capable guy. I'll tell you his name after. I don't mean to be shitty, but anyway.
Right.
So I was working in Manhattan, and I really enjoy Manhattan for a lot of reasons, especially in the late 80s, early 90s. It was a lot of fun. And so I'm in Manhattan, and I get a phone call to meet this guy at the airport, take him right to the movie set. As soon as we get to the movie set, he's going to do this 3 hours worth of shit, and then his ass is out of there, back to the airport. Now, he was a very high-profile guy, very expensive guy, very well-known guy, tough guy, like a legitimate old-school tough guy. He was older than me. So I'd met him at an awards ceremony way before that, maybe a year or two before that. And I got to the airport, and the production assistant, now, production assistant on a movie set, they work their ass off and they don't get paid much. But they're the ones that turn into your directors and producers later on down the line. So if they stay with it, it's worthwhile. But in the beginning, they're the ones that work the hardest and they don't get paid that much. Mm-hmm. And like I've been on movie sets where the Teamsters would pass around a hat and other unions would pass around a hat and everybody throw money in it so that they could give it to the production assistants at the end of the week because they get paid so little, right? So anyway, I'm with the production assistant and he's got the headpiece on with the radio and he's got this big tool belt sort of thing, and I'm with the guy from the airline, and the plane is supposed to land at a particular gate, and I've got a contact of mine on the phone, and the plane's not coming at that gate, and it all turns to shit, and I made the decision I'm going to go to the gate that I think it is. And the airline guy was with me, and the production guy didn't come with me. So then I was at the right gate, and the production guy was at the wrong gate. And that's fine. That happens. So I met the guy. We walked out to the car. The production guy called up to us. We took off. We're driving down the road, and the first thing client says, "John, good to see you again." I had no idea how I remember my name, right? He said, "John, it's good to see you again." "Yes, sir, it's good to see you too," right? He goes, "All right, I need a bar, and I want it to be close to the set." "Yes, sir." In Manhattan, it's kind of hard to fuck this one up, you know.
There's a lot of those.
So we pull in. We pull in front of this bar. Everybody's on set. They're waiting for him. They're squawking in this dude's ear. And we pull in this bar. We walk in. Me and this guy walk in, sit in the bar. And he says, you drink?" I said, "I do, sir, but I'm working. No, thank you." He said, "Scotch?" I said, "No, sir, I'm fine." He said, "Scotch?" "Yes, sir."
Yes.
"Scotch." He goes, "Can I pick?" I said, "Please." So he had his drink. I had a drink with him. We went out and got in the car. He does his couple hours on set, and I go back with him to the airport.
Right.
That's when you're. That's
what I was talking about. Yeah. I mean, there are certain social situations where you're going to be expected. So.
Now
you're going to be expected to be able to drink and not make a fucking moron out of yourself.
You know, a buddy of mine, when he used to hire people, he'd say, "All right, we're going to do the interview," and there's a whole lot of people who want to do this stuff, but there's not too many people that are prepared to do it for whatever variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. So finding good people is always hard. Finding good guys is hard. Finding good women's hard. So what we would do is we would do the interview, the formal interview, and then he'd say, "And when you leave, go grab a drink with them someplace and see how they act." And
that's a good test.
There's been a bunch of them that didn't pass
they
the
didn't
drink
even
test.
know they were still being tested, did they?
No, flashing their watch and chasing ass and going crazy after 2 drinks. And you're like, all right, that's fine.
Yeah, we need to know that.
Yeah.
There's a personality flaw that will have a bearing on their employment status.
It's very easy. It's very easy to spot. It doesn't take long to spot.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It certainly doesn't. God, I've been around people that they drink half a beer, and it's as though they've given themselves permission to be a fucking asshole.
Yes.
Suddenly. Perfectly normally behaved prior to that, half ounce alcohol, and
it's something you can't drink.
Need to get away. No, those can't have that.
If you can't drink, you shouldn't drink.
No. And you ought to have enough sense to know that.
Yeah, that's easy enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, who can you tell us about that's good at this besides you?
Well, I work at it every day. There's a bunch of really. The guy that's working currently right now, whose name I can mention, his last name's Cobham. He's probably the best there is in a variety of jobs, and that's
right.
My
You
position.
mentioned him earlier.
He's one of the best there is.
Older
guy. He's been
terribly experienced.
Terribly experienced. My buddy that I've worked for him first, and he ran the first detail I ever worked on. He's still active. He's still kicking ass, and he's still good at it. Now he's at a level that he doesn't have to get up at 0 dark 30 anymore. You know what I mean? He's managing stuff. I got hired off a detail a while back. I was probably been in the business for about 5 or 6 years, maybe 4 years. I got hired off a detail to go work for this corporate gig, and I bumped into a guy there named Gallagher, Frank Gallagher, and he was one of the corporate guys. He had been a Marine, right, and he had came and took this corporate security gig. Started out as a uniformed, I believe, and very quickly came to the protection detail. So when I went on the protection detail, he and I worked together on this detail, and he was a very talented guy. And then the detail sort of started deteriorating, not through anything we did, but just the nature of the beast. And I left, and I wanted to find a place for him to land. So I was able to make some phone calls. And his resume stood on its own at the time, don't get me wrong, but I was able to call people, and he went to work for another detail in New York. Now, the detail in New York always needed guys because it was so difficult, and it burned them out so quickly. Mm-hmm. Now, the average lifespan of a guy on that detail is 2.5 years. Frank is an exceptional guy. He was there for, I don't know, over a decade, I guess, right? And then he left there, and he went to work for, he never did much celebrity work. He did that, a very high-risk detail for a bunch of years, managed that, and then he left there, and he started working for Bremer. He took care of Bremer when Bremer was ambassador to Iraq, I guess, right? Mm-hmm. So when Bremer went over there, he went over there as chief of the detail and took care of Bremer. Wrote a book about it. It's called The Bremer Detail, amazingly enough. So he wrote a book about it.
Right.
And he is one of the really talented guys that came from the military side of things, you know. So there's some really good, capable guys out there. I met a guy the other day, seems very capable. His name's Byron Rogers. He's got a social media thing. He does a bunch of social media stuff. He's got EP Lifestyle. It's an Instagram thing. I'm not familiar with social media that much, but I know that people are getting jobs off of social media, and people are using it to communicate back and forth. If you want to stay relevant, you got to be aware of it.
Right.
So
Same with us.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter whether I like it or not.
Yeah.
It's just what we have to do.
Yeah. So Byron talked to me about the social media thing, and he seems like a good, capable guy, and he's got a bunch of good people around him. He's working in the business, and he's managing this EP Lifestyle thing that I'm not as familiar with. But I'd sit down, I'd cut time out of the schedule for the class to talk to him a few times. And he's making use of it. He's using it as a pretty good tool, I think. So it's always interesting. You know, if you're not relevant, who gives a shit, right? You turn into some ranting old man that nobody cares about.
Right.
So I try to stay up with as much as I can.
Right. Well, I guess the important thing that we need to do to wrap things up is to note the fact that executive protection is a function of the fact that there are people who need to be protected, and these people are high-profile people. They're wealthy, they're powerful, they're widely known, they're celebrities, and the fact that they are widely known and are wealthy and are influential means that there is a potential threat anytime these people anytime they're at home even. Yeah. The threat of kidnapping, the threat of assault, threat of embarrassment attempts, bribery, blackmail, this sort of thing. And executive protection, to the extent possible, mitigates these threats so that these people can continue to function effectively in their role as a public figure.
Yes, they've got it's whatever role that they decide that they're going to function as, right? So they've got a thing to do. There's a very interesting quote that's attributed to Charles de Gaulle. I don't know that it's true or not. I wasn't there when he said it. But the guys basically said, listen, we can't protect you. It's too dangerous, and you can't go there. And he said, my job is to be Charles de Gaulle, your job is to protect me, right? So, I don't know if it's true or not. You hear a bunch of quotes, you know. The only thing that makes something less believable is if it's an Asian quote, you know.
Right. Most quotes attributed to Charles de Gaulle, he didn't say.
He didn't say, right. Yeah. So, it's to support their lifestyle. The function is not security. The function is them to live their life.
Right,
and
at the level that they have to live.
Yeah, and you to reduce the risk. It's all a function of risk, to reduce the risk so they can live their life. So would it be safer not to go on a red carpet at all? Well, yeah. But that's not the real. They're going to go to it.
They have to, because that's their job.
Yeah, and a lot of times some people enjoy that stuff more than others. You know, well, if a person's going to show up and walk from the car through the red carpet and go inside and not shake any hands, their risk is automatically reduced. But that's some people decide not to do that. You know? So, and the safer you can make the environment for them, the more it gives them the opportunity to do what they enjoy doing.
Right.
I mean, it's easy to say things about celebrities and stuff. It's easy to say things about them and attribute traits to them that we want them to have, right?
Right.
And it's easy to downplay what they are, but at the end of the day, they're people. They got a job, they got families, they've got husbands, they've got wives, There are people that need somebody around, maybe not all the time, but on occasion, to make things smoother for them,
Right.
so they can do what they need to do.
And the public perception of people like that is that these types of celebrities and these types of famous people are assholes. And sometimes that's true, but a lot of times it's not. You and I have talked about this several times. Some of these people are fine people.
It's been my experience that I was thinking about this on the ride here. As far as what we would determine as being a celebrity, like a movie star or celebrity, somebody that you would know and you'd see, it's been my experience that they all treated me like gold. They were all concerned with whether I had something to eat, was I getting enough sleep. They treated me like gold. I've had good luck with anyone that I've worked for that could be identified as a celebrity. They've all been very pleasant to me, and a lot of it, where people have issues sometimes is they don't realize what goes into that. So there's a whole bunch of drop dead gorgeous people in LA, right? There's more
in Dallas.
There's only a few that are celebrity, right? So there's a
there
reason,
really is.
There's a reason for that, right? There's a reason why they are what they are. Now you might not be able to identify it, you might not be able to put your finger on it, but there's a reason why this person has rose to this level and this person hasn't. And they're not like you and I. I mean, they're carbon-based beings, right? But they're not like us.
Right.
I took a guy one time that walked on a stage and leaned against a car and walked off the stage and made over $1 million for that, whatever that 50 seconds takes.
Right.
I never got that kind of payday. That's not like me.
No.
There's a reason why. If they were like us, then they would take turns protecting each other, right?
Right.
That's not the case.
They're in higher demand than we are.
Yeah.
They're in higher demand that you, as executive protection, are.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I've
and I guess that influences their behavior.
But
it was refreshing to me to know that some of these guys, some of these gals that are viewed as wealthy, talented movie stars, constantly in demand, $5 million a picture, $15 million a picture, are still good people.
Yes,
that'll treat their employees and treat the people that are working for them like human beings, and that not everybody is a fucking asshole at that level. That was just I'm glad to know that.
I was happy to be able to share it. I came from a detail that when I this is a long time ago. We're going back some years. I came from a detail that was very regimented and very strict and very hardcore, and the risk was there, but the guy was a very difficult person to be around. Spectacularly difficult to be around on a variety of levels, right? I went from that detail to working a very well-known celebrity, and it was a complete and utter culture shock. It was all of a sudden somebody's worried about whether I had something to eat, or somebody wants to talk to me about stuff, or somebody decides I need a new pair of glasses, so they buy me new glasses. Just insanity. And you're like, holy shit! I can see why everybody falls in love with these people.
Right.
And they're capable people. I was protecting the guy. We were in outside of Vegas, and there was 2 bikes there for us to use. So we went on this big long motorcycle ride. My bike breaks down. It's a loaner, but it breaks down. He's the one that walks down the road until he finds a piece of fucking wire and uses my Leatherman to fix my bike, and then he rides it back because he says, "Listen, this thing might act up again. I want to be the guy on it." Okay.
Oh, that's
there
good.
ain't no chance of me fixing the motorcycle if it breaks down.
Well, that's cool. That's cool.
So I had all good experiences with celebrities. Yeah. It was busy, but it was fun busy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure it was.
It was fun busy. Yeah.
I'm sure it was.
I mean, you get to someplace like Tokyo, and you're there, and you walk into this red carpet, and this was at a party, and the music turned on this very easily recognized theme song. The music kicks on. A whole group of people on both sides grab these big ass ropes and lunge these ropes up in the air, separating the crowd, and all those people screaming, and all the music's playing, and these guys are holding these ropes, leaning back, keeping the crowd back, and they're going down shaking hands. That's pretty heady stuff for a guy that grew up in rural Virginia, right? Yeah. A friend of mine's listening, and when I met you, you were good at beating people up and keeping your mouth shut. It's the only two things you could do.
Oh, fascinating stuff, John. Listen, I appreciate you being here, man.
Thanks for having me.
I've enjoyed it. Always enjoy your stories, and I just thought we would share some of those with you people who are once again watching Starting Strength Radio. We appreciate you joining us every Friday, and we'll see you next time. Thanks to John Musser for being with us. Talk to you later.
Thank you.